This is an overview of CRJU 714, Ethics in Criminal Justice. This is a graduate course at the University of South Carolina, Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And my name is Hayden Smith, Dr. Hayden Smith, and I'm the instructor of this class. Today we'll be talking about a brief overview of the class, going over the syllabus and some basic expectations. First, a little bit about me. My research interests center really on corrections, mental health, issues that involve the intersection of the public health and criminal justice system, standards of care, that is the way that inmates are treated, and the standards that go along with prisons and jails, with an emphasis on prisons, and topics to do with health outcomes in the criminal justice system. I'm quite active in terms of research. For those of you who have not met me, you can take a quick look at my Google Scholar page, or even the page on the university homepage, on the criminal justice homepage. I think I'm approaching, at this point in time, about 50 articles. I've got a couple of books, a couple of book chapters, encyclopedia entries, and I'm active in terms of working with prisons on their program evaluations and developing policies and a bunch of written policies for them. So I remain quite active in terms of the theoretical work, as well as discipline suited work, and my publications are actually in a whole bunch of different topics. I've written on policing, I've written on public health issues, I've written mental health, corrections, criminal justice theory. So I like working on different topics, and although I do have areas of expertise. In terms of hobbies, I have a family, which is a kind of probably an odd thing to put under hobbies, but I didn't know where else to put it. 2 kids that I love very much, my wife, who I love very much, and a dog who I love very much. My dog is actually a 260-pound Mastiff, so she's a real sweet puppy to have. And hobbies, I love doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Any chance I get, I put on the gi and I go roll around and try to choke people out, and that's actually one of my favorite things to do, and hopefully not get choked myself. So that's a little bit about me in terms of an introduction. Here's some information that corresponds with the syllabus, and you can find a syllabus on your Blackboard site. It's CRJU 714 graduate class, section 1. It's classed as distributed learning. It's a completely online format, so all the work that you will do will be online through your Blackboard website. My office is located in Corral College, room 112. You probably know where that is, and there's a telephone number. But always the best way to reach me and the quickest turnaround time is email. And so if you do need to contact me or you have questions, email's the way to go. So now we think about the topic at hand. What is ethics? Well, ethics is a moral philosophy that is classed as a branch of philosophy. So philosophy actually has 5 branches, or 5 kind of sub-disciplines, and moral philosophy or ethics is one of those. The focus is the systemizing, defending, and recommending concepts for right and wrong conduct. That's a very broad general description. Of course, for this course, we apply issues of ethics and moral decision making to the criminal justice system. So the course overview is defined as an exploration of classic and contemporary theories of ethics and their applications to criminal justice decision making and policy. The course includes examination of theoretical orientations and ethical issues that challenge the contemporary criminal justice system. This course includes material centered on social justice and ethical quandaries in policing, corrections, and court-based agencies and processes. And we also look at local issues that present ethical dilemmas for policymakers. We use one textbook. It's actually not a lot of textbooks for graduates that are criminal justice specific. So when I did a big search for textbooks for this class, I found a number that were graduate level philosophy books. However, they were strictly philosophy and very, very difficult to read. Um, Not much help for people who were going into research in the criminal justice field or practitioners. So I opted to use an undergraduate book and supplement it with a bunch of readings that are given on a weekly basis. So in addition to this, there will be PDFs and links to certain readings to supplement that gap. This is a book. It's called The Elements of Moral Philosophy. It's by Rachels and Rachels. I believe it's a father-son team, and I believe one of them is deceased, so it might just be Rachel's now. And the latest version at this time is the 8th edition, which is published in 2014. Now, you may have found an earlier edition, and I'm not sure how the chapters and everything else matches up. Earlier editions you could probably find for $1 or $2 on eBay. However, this book, it's not that expensive. I think it's in the $30 range or less. A really good book. There's a reason that there's been 8 editions of it. I think you'll find that it's a very easy read. It's very accessible. It presents some philosophical topics in a pretty straightforward and practical way. And it's a book you may actually want to keep after you're done with the class because it's pretty straightforward. In terms of learning outcomes, by the end of the course, my goal is to have you be able to identify and contrast ethical philosophies and place them in certain social, cultural, historical context. Number 2, to examine these philosophies and place them in the real-world criminal justice setting with regard to policies and practices, and to demonstrate and enhance understanding of ethical assumptions and their outcomes. In terms of instruction, of course, this is a different structure because it is entirely online. It is, I believe the word is asynchronous, which means that there's not a certain time of the week that we have to meet. You can do the course materials at your leisure. You could actually work ahead, except you can't work behind, if that makes sense. So feel free to work ahead, but you can't work behind. It's your responsibility to complete work. I'll go through some of the different expectations. And some of this work takes a little bit of time to plan, so as always, start early. In terms of following the rules of the road, follow the Carolina Creed, which is don't cheat, don't steal, all the rest of the stuff. You'll be asked to upload assignments in Safe Assignment that does a plagiarism check. But apart from that, just follow the rules of the road that are pretty straightforward for any class. Here's the USC Honor Code that is pretty much in every syllabus, and you've probably taken enough classes at USC to follow these before, or at least to have an understanding of them. In terms of a time and day, I've designated Thursday as the actual day of the class. This is only for purposes of having things due, and I've designated the time 10 p.m. I do this for all of my online classes, and that way I can remember Thursdays at 10 if that's when something is due. Of course, Eastern time, it just makes it consistent and easy to remember. Generally, with my responses, as I said, it's always best to write to me with emails rather than phone calls. My phone calls don't get forwarded from my office. Emails, I have a documentation of when you wrote, what you wrote, and I'll respond usually within 24 hours. One tip there is to use the university email system. Often things that are not university, such as Gmail, Hotmail, Google, will go into my junk box, just like other professors. So I use the university email to contact me, and I believe you can actually email through Blackboard with your university email too. As I said before, online assignments, written papers are submitted via Safe Assignment, and papers are graded and returned with comments within 5 days. And 5 days is fairly long because the first paper is probably the lengthiest one, but it'll often be less than 5 days. The grading scale follows the USC grading scale. A couple of resources for student success. The first one is the Writing Center. You can see the address there. And this is something that will help you if you need to brush up on your writing, have trouble with your writing. I do an introductory lecture called Writing 101 that hopefully will help you with some aspects of writing where I've seen students have problems before, and some tips. But if ever you need some external help for the class, I'm not sure of all the services they provide, but you're welcome to go and use them. Next is the library. Hopefully you know where it is. We can do a lot of our work online, and in this class we use the APA format for our citations. But of course we can do it online. We can order our journal articles and books and everything else. However, it's a good idea to know where the library is and what it does, and they do have a lot of resources. You can look at it in the homepage, or even go over there and wander about and see kind of where the library is structured and what it does. If you have any sort of disability that requires attention, we have an office on campus that it's best to work through them, and then they'll notify me. We don't have any sort of timed exams in this class. Usually that's what students with issues, disability issues, will be requesting. However, it's a case-by-case basis. Because it's an online class, you'll have to self-identify, and you can either go through the Office of Student Disability Services or just email me directly in order to self-identify if you'll need any sort of requirements for this matter. Other issues that may occur is issues related to Blackboard and technology, and there's two links that you'll find in the website. Two links you'll find in the syllabus. You can also find them on the university website. And these are for issues if your Blackboard have issues with Blackboard technology or just basic technology in general. There's a couple of numbers. There's a help desk where you can lodge a question and they'll actually even call you back. One other thing worth mentioning is student health services. A lot of students don't realize that they get 5 free visits per year. There's a range of services, and I'm not so sure about students in distant parts of the state. But for those in Columbia, they definitely work well in terms of any sort of mental health issue, stress, distress, any sort of life event that's troubling you. I recommend to my undergrads and graduate students to view this as a resource, not to be embarrassed. Sometimes life gets the best of all of us, and if you do sense that you have an issue, please don't hesitate to reach out to them, and it's all confidential, and you can let me know or not let me know, totally up to you. But this is something I just give to all students as a resource, because often in undergrad or graduate, students may face particular issues that they need to have addressed, so don't hesitate to do so. Okay, in terms of the class, just a brief overview on the structure, and most of this will make a lot more sense as the semester starts. Part 1 is titled Theoretical Ethics, and this class is divided into 4 parts. Part 1 essentially goes until spring break, with a paper on this topic due the week before spring break. So you'll submit a theoretical paper that's 40% of your total grade. Obviously that's a pretty big chunk. It's a 10 to 15 page double-spaced paper, so it will actually take you a while to get it done, so you can probably start early. And it deals with 5 separate weak topics. The first is virtue ethics, then utilitarianism, then Kantianism, then social contract theory, and it finishes with philosophy meets sociology and criminology. So each one of these weeks we work through. Generally you'll have a lecture like you hear me talking now that you'll click on. You'll have the textbook that you'll refer to, and the certain chapters go with certain weeks. You'll have additional readings. There may be additional videos that I suggest you watch just to kind of recap. And you'll engage with these topics on a weekly basis, and based on all of those weeks, they should help you develop this theoretical paper. For part one, I try to focus much more on philosophy without too much reference on criminal justice. As we move towards the paper, we start to deal with criminal justice a little bit more, and then parts 2, 3, and 4 are much more related to criminal justice. So I view part 1 as kind of the building blocks of this course. It's a time when students can understand the basic dynamics of philosophy without delving too much into specific criminal justice issues. So it kind of moves more from the theory to the practical as the semester continues. So part 1 is theoretical, as I said, deals a lot with moral philosophies and gives you the building blocks of the course. This paper is due right before spring break, so once you turn it in, you'll have your spring break to yourself, and after spring break we'll start on a completely different section. Part 2, after we return from spring break, is called research ethics. We can also think about this as academic ethics. We look at a lecture of mine which examines case studies of research that is conducted that was done with either no ethical consideration or some major ethical gaps. You'll find that there's some additional videos and readings on this topic, and we go over some of the basic well-known case studies that are questionable, such as the Stanley Milgram experiment, the Stanford prison experiment, and some of the other ones you may not have heard of. I also touch in some studies from public health, because they're often related to criminal justice or even occurred in a criminal justice setting. So we're thinking about students in this area that will engage in research, hopefully all of you at some point during your graduate education, or at least want to know, for some master's students, want to know what this research is about and how best to protect yourself when dealing with specific issues. We then move to institutional review boards, which are at every university and are responsible for making sure that all research studies are conducted in the correct ethical manner. And the assignment for part 2, which runs for about 2 weeks, is the completion of what they call CITI training. The full name of CITI is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. And this is a third-party website where you will go, you will use the information provided in the slides and in these 2 weeks, as well as the information on that website, to conduct your free certification in human subjects training. Now this is important because if you're going to conduct research with a professor while at USC, or even as part of your dissertation or master's thesis, you will need to have this CITI training, it's called, in place. The CITI training itself, just to give you a heads up, can take anywhere around 6 to 10 hours. It can be rather tedious. The case studies and the IRB information provided in the 2 weeks will help you, and the information on their website will help you. What we'll be doing here is the documentation that you pass that course, which you'll send to me, and that represents 20% of your total grade. So all of these topics merge together, but the outcome we're looking for is this CITI training. Another reason this will be very beneficial is when you go to conduct research with a professor at USC or by yourself, and you submit an IRB application for your research, which is mandatory, one, you'll be familiar with what IRB boards do, you'll be familiar with the IRB website and the process, and two, when it comes to the point in time in which you have to show that you have CITI training, you'll already have your documentation in place. The documentation just means you passed the course. Now, the CITI training is valid for 3 years, so after 3 years you'll have to renew that training, but it's a good way to get something out of this class that's very tangible that you can use for research, and also something that can serve you well in terms of knowing the different fundamental processes for research protocols and ethics in the academic setting. So part 2 is research ethics, and this has an obvious emphasis in criminal justice here. So the last 2 parts, part 3, first of all, deals with professional ethics. In this section we speak specifically about criminal justice, and we're focused here on the practitioner. So we're thinking about all the different actors in the criminal justice system. In courts, we're thinking about lawyers, judges, and the ethical requirements for those people. In law enforcement, we are thinking about code of ethics in all the different fields of law enforcement, federal, such as the FBI, local, as well as other law enforcement agencies, and what their code of ethics state they have to do, or don't have to do, or shouldn't do, rather. And the correctional system, which is prisons, jails, probation, and parole. We also think about your correctional officers and your mental health and physical health staff that work in corrections. For all of these different professional groups, we also are thinking about the ethical approaches that administrators would use. So in this case, we're not thinking about your police officer on the street or your frontline correctional officer, but rather the administrators who develop policies and would be assisting those people in policies and approaches. So there are codes of ethics for public administrators too. So there's a assignment in this section that's 20% of your grade, and then that part 3 represents 2 weeks, and part 4, the final 2 weeks, is applied ethics. This is when we bring all of the other parts together. This is 20% of your grade as well, and we'll be wrapping this up by applying theoretical ethics, research ethics, professional ethics in the applied setting. In this section, you'll be picking a criminal justice topic of your choosing, and you'll be writing a short, perhaps about a 5-page reaction essay based on that topic, using all the information that you learnt throughout the semester. So theoretical ethics goes to spring break. Following spring break, there's approximately 6 weeks, and for the 6 weeks, you do 2 weeks for part 2, 2 weeks for part 3, and 2 weeks for part 4, and that should wrap up the semester. I think it's designed in a way that it moves fairly quickly and it becomes much more applied as the semester progresses. It moves from a theoretical understanding and the building blocks of moral ethics and moves towards how to apply them in the real world. That is what applied ethics means. It means taking the hypothetical philosophical approaches and applying them to specific issues. In philosophy, these issues would be things such as euthanasia, abortion, right to life, voting, all the major life and death kind of issues. Of course, in criminal justice, we make this much more applied. So we might be thinking about things like the death penalty, mass incarceration, police use of force, any of the kind of the topics that we think about that are specific to criminal justice and that we can apply those ethical considerations to. So that wraps up the overview of CRJU 714, Ethics in Criminal Justice. I've put some effort into this course, so I hope you like it. And you can just pretty much follow Blackboard and the syllabus in order to get a better understanding and jump right in and get this semester going. Welcome aboard, and I hope you enjoy this semester.